Let's make a landscape inspired by the artist Grant Hafner. On the left is one of his paintings, and on the right is an example of our project. So Grant Hafner is a contemporary American painter who is originally from Berkeley, California. But he has spent most of his life in Long Island, New York, and now lives in Massachusetts. He is known for his vibrant landscapes that use bright lines of colors to show perspective and depth. Perspective is the view from where you are. In a landscape, there are three parts: the foreground, which is the front, the middle ground, which is the middle, and the background, which is in the back. The objects in the foreground appear the largest, and the objects in the background appear the smallest because they are further away from the viewer. Changing the size of objects in your landscape shows depth. Grant Hafner almost always includes utility poles that add to the sense of depth in his landscapes. The further back the poles are, the smaller they appear. He includes utility poles since they are a common symbol seen along American roadways. He hopes that viewers recognize these and feel a sense of connection and nostalgia. Grant Hafner is inspired by the roads, sunsets, and bodies of water that surround him where he lives. He says, "My work exaggerates and explores the intersections of the sky and the open road." He also says that no two sunsets are the same. Grant Hafner says, "My paintings allow the viewer to escape life, get behind the wheel, and to feel the flow of forward motion and momentum. Remember the white and yellow lines of the road, straight roadways, and power lines." Let's see some of his work in a gallery now.
Passage is kind of a double meaning for me. Not only is it like passage, in space and time, it's also passage for me kind of out of the social media world into something bigger, which is this incredible show. We all in our 20s like road trips. So I went cross country a couple times. I religiously read Jack Kerouac, and On the Road was a big part of my 20s. So that metaphor was kind of stuck in my head, and then I went to SVA for a year. And within that 1 year of schooling, I kind of came up with the concept that I wanted to create landscapes and divide everything into lines. If I could somehow dissect what I was looking to in a whole assortment of lines that would add up to the whole and still represent the picture, that was my initial concept, and that was my hypothesis, and I just went with that. I wanted to explore color to its fullest over the past couple years. As I was painting, I went from a very muted panel, and I started to use color theory more, and the idea of letting the color dictate the value and the temperature and the mood and the depth of the painting. So I use color in a way to draw you in. As I'm trying to capture the gesture of the paint, a lot of the times I'm just doing one quick line and like stepping back and just like looking at it before I wipe it off maybe and try again. It's a huge building process, so just getting to this point was extremely exhausting. And then once I finished, now it's starting to settle in, and it's extremely exciting. My name's Grant Hafner. Welcome to Passage.
Now that we've learned about Grant Hafner and we've seen some of his work, let's go over the directions for our project before we start. For your supplies, you will need a piece of paper, a pencil, an eraser, a ruler, colored markers to add color, or you could use something like paint if you have it, and then the Grant Hafner landscape directions that you can find on Google Classroom, which will help you get started. First, decide which Grant Hafner landscape you would like to recreate and start your drawing with a horizon line and a road shape. Remember, the horizon line is the line where the land and the sky meet, and it goes horizontally across your paper. Then, draw utility poles or other details to show depth. After, add color using converging and parallel lines. Fill your entire paper with color. All right, artist, let's go ahead and get started. So when we're working on our Grant Hafner landscapes, we're going to be focusing on using a couple different types of lines. The first line that we'll be using that you're probably familiar with is called the horizon line, the line where the land meets the sky. So a line that goes horizontally across your paper. We'll also be using parallel lines by using lines of color that are going in the same direction. So here we see lines that follow the same curve or that go across. We'll also be using converging lines by choosing a point on our horizon line to be a vanishing point, or the point where everything gets smaller. So we can see with this brown road that the lines are converging towards this vanishing point and they are meeting there. So we're gonna pick a vanishing point on our horizon line to start. So the first step is drawing a horizon line across your paper. You can use a ruler if you have one to help you make a very straight line. So I'm going to put my horizon line a little bit below the middle so that I have more room for my sky. And I'm using a pencil to draw my horizon line. After, I need to choose a vanishing point on this horizon line. So in this example, we see the vanishing point here. It's a little bit off to the side, but you can pick anywhere on that line. I usually like to pick somewhere closer to the middle and not right on the side. For this one, I'm going to put it about in the middle. And I'm going to draw a straight road for this one. This example is one with a curved road. Either one works. So for a straight road, I'm going to use my ruler again to draw two diagonal lines going to the vanishing point. So there's one side of the road, and then here's the other side, and it's meeting at the vanishing point and going to the edge of my paper. So it's like I have a triangle here. Now I'm going to draw a line here to show where the middle of the road is. Like we saw in some of Grant Hafner's examples, he uses a yellow line like we would see in the middle of a road. So I'm putting that line there just to tell myself that later I will be putting yellow there, but I'm going to end up erasing that pencil line later. It's just a guide for me. And then we saw some utility poles in Grant Hafner's work, which are power line poles, poles that bring power lines to different parts of a city or different areas. So I'll show you how to draw utility poles that also go to our vanishing point. So the one in the front is going to be the tallest. The one near the vanishing point is going to be the shortest. I'm going to use my ruler again to help me draw a straight line. And they actually don't have to be perfectly straight up and down vertical line. This one is angled a little bit to the right. We can see some examples of that in Grant Hafner's work. Your utility poles, they don't have to be perfectly straight. They can be angled a little bit. And as I'm drawing them, they're getting shorter towards the vanishing point. Then when we see utility poles, they also have a horizontal line that goes across the top. And these will also get smaller as they get closer to the vanishing point. So this one is the widest. This one's a little bit less wide, just a little bit smaller each time. Now I'm going to leave them like that for now, and I will draw the power lines that go on them after I add color. But that way I know where they will be. Next, I'm going to start adding color using markers to create these bright lines of color. Remember, we're using converging lines, lines that meet towards the vanishing point, and parallel lines, lines that go in the same direction. So our focus here is adding color using line. So here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to start with the land, which I decided is going to be mostly shades of green. So I've picked out some different greens from my markers. I can also throw in a little bit of yellow and maybe even some brown, because if it was grass, it would have some different shades of colors here. Maybe I'll start with brown on the side here, and I'm just going to kind of outline this line where the road is with my marker. And I can go back over this and make it a little bit thicker. Something to keep in mind is when you come further towards the front, the lines of color are going to be a little bit thicker or wider in the front and thinner in the back. Now maybe I'll mix some green in there for my next line, and you can kind of overlap your colors. So my green is overlapping. The lines of color are still going in the same direction here. Maybe I'll mix in a little bit of yellow. I'm going to continue filling in this part with different greens and a little bit of yellow and brown. I'm done filling in this side, and notice that my lines continue to be parallel as I filled in my color. Now when I move to the other side, I'm just going to go and do the same thing. And I'm going to add color right over these pencil lines that I drew for the utility poles. And I will outline those with a color later. Now I'm ready to work on the road. I'm going to use a mixture of black and gray to show the pavement of the road. I'm also going to erase this line that I drew, which is where the yellow lines in the middle of the road will be. I can still see it, so I know that that's where I'm going to add yellow, but I don't want it left in pencil line because it's going to show through my yellow marker. So I'll start with some black on the edge of the road. And then I'm going to fill that in with some gray lines. Then to add the yellow, I'm going to draw the lines in the middle of the road. And I will add black or gray between them. Now I'm going to move on to the sky, and for my sky I'm using a mixture of purples, pinks, and blues to show a sunset. When you're working on your sky, it might be helpful to turn your paper so that you can draw your lines going in a vertical direction, even though they are horizontal. I just find that easier when I'm working on mine. So I'm gonna start with a color. I think I'll just start with blue, and I'm going to go all the way across my horizon line here. So remember, we're working with parallel lines. So all the lines in the sky are going to go in the same direction or be parallel. And again, here I'm just drawing over those utility pole lines. I'm going to end up outlining them later. Then I can add another color. So maybe I'll do pink next. The colors can overlap a little bit. Notice that when the pink overlaps here, it's making kind of like a purple. And my lines don't have to be perfectly all the way across, so that it gives off a little more of a sunset look. Maybe the next color I use will be purple. And I'm kind of using my marker almost like it's a paintbrush here. So I'm going back and forth and still using parallel lines because it's horizontal, but I'm not drawing a full line all the way across my paper, leaving a little bit of white space that I can fill in with a color. And I'm going to continue doing that until I reach the top of my sky. The last thing I need to do here is outline the utility poles. I'm going to use a black Sharpie because it's permanent and it's not going to make any of the colors from my markers bleed. So I'm going to go over those pencil lines that I drew in the beginning and give them an outline. And I'm using my ruler to help me make a straight line again. Then I'm going to outline the horizontal line that goes across the utility pole. Then after that, I'm going to draw the electrical wires that go from one pole to the next. I'm going to use a line that is a cloud line or a bumpy line. So it has a curve and then it goes up, and that goes from one pole to the next. Okay, artist, so I'm all done with my Grant Hafner landscape. I hope you had fun learning about the artist Grant Hafner. and seeing some of his amazing work that focuses on using lines to create beautiful landscapes. I can't wait to see what you create. Have fun, artist!